Welcome to the podcast. My name is Jamie Knight, and I am a realtor from Cajun Country, Lafayette, Louisiana. The goal of this podcast is to provide massive value by bringing insider access to our area's top agents and find out how they've been able to achieve massive success in their business. My hope is that you take a few things away from their experiences to grow your own business. My guest today is Jonathan Spears with the Spears Group from Compass 30A in the deep south of Florida, baby, on the beach, God's country out there. So I'm so excited to have Jonathan on the podcast. Jonathan, man, how are you, brother? Welcome.
Jamie, I'm doing amazing. I'm so glad to be here. We're about to have some fun. And that's right, we're on Florida's Gulf Coast, which I feel like we're sister markets to Louisiana. I see more Louisiana tags around here every day.
Yeah, absolutely. So all my Cajun people right here, you've got a great referral partner potentially in Jonathan and his team out there in that market. They're the best. So excited to hear a little bit about your backstory, man. So start there. Let's go
Yeah.
there. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the real estate business and give us some backstory, man. Start early because I want people to get the whole story.
Yeah, dude, I'd be happy to. My journey was definitely not a lateral one. So I was very much an ambitious kid. I decided to enroll in college at the age of 14. So, before I ever had a real estate license, I knew I was going somewhere, and I was like, I've got to get out of my house. I'm ready to get into the real world, and I was trying to circumvent high school. And I did that by making my first great cold call, which I know a lot of you guys on this podcast know exactly what that's like. My knees shaking, getting the sweats, and I pick up the phone and I called the dean of our local community college and I just said, "Hey, my name's Jonathan Spears, and I would love to enroll in full-time courses at your school." And they're like, "Okay, well, under what credentials? You got to be 16 and you've got to be in the 10th grade." And I just said, "Look, I am in the 10th grade. I've been homeschooling," which I may have stretched the truth a little bit on that one.
Let's go.
But how do I get in? And they gave me the testing information, and I tested in, and everybody thought I was the teacher's kid that was, home from school sick every day, every time I showed up to class. So it was a great experience. So I started college at 14, had my first degree at 16, had a second degree, 18 going on 19. And around my 18th birthday, this was circa 2010. So you'll remember this, the BP oil spill was front and center that year, at least for the Gulf Coast states.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
there's anything that a resort market doesn't need, it's environmental negative attention. So we had CNN with like this live stream camera of oil pumping into the Gulf. That was the year I decided to get a real estate license and get into real estate. What was fun about it is I did not know that that was going to happen that year, but what I did know is that real estate is such an entrepreneurial outlet. And for me, I feel like an artist that wants to paint an incredible photo, and the way that I do that is through building great businesses and finding out how to serve people at the highest level. And for any of us in real estate, like whether you've been in real estate your whole career, like I have, or you've worked other sales jobs or other jobs in general, it's all about just adding value. And I looked like the number one baby faced 18-year-old you've ever seen. Every time I'd show up to a listing appointment or to any type of interaction with a customer, I never once met with them at that age. And somebody didn't ask if I was still in high school or if I was just somebody's assistant or where my parents were at. I got that one time.
Love
And
that.
at this point, I started to build a little bit of a thick skin to it. So I'd start having fun with it. And when somebody would call out my age, I would turn that into a superpower. And I'd be like, "Look, you know what? I don't have any kids. I am actually fresh out of college. Here's my story." And most people go, "Whoa, you went to school early." And it started to build trust, which a lot of us today are in constant states of trying to court potential clients. And the way that you do that is likability and building trust with one another. And so I became very good at instantly connecting and building trust at a very early age.
Love that, dude. That's awesome. So what was I guess, the deciding factor from you graduated college and then
Yeah.
now you decided to jump into the real estate business? Why the real estate business, I guess?
Well, my parents' home was being sold in a distressed state. And so I got a real estate license to try to help them navigate that sale. In fact, in business school, I thought the realtors were the dirt on the bottom of your shoe. Like economics professors, finance professors, which is what I studied, they did not value the real estate profession. And what was fun about that time frame is this was right when like $1 Million Listing was coming out. And so you sort of had this like reality TV perception of real estate agents. And I would go into appointments with, prospective clients, and they would all relate me to a reality TV character they saw, like some young guy who drives a nice car, and they want to like live that lifestyle. And it was kind of interesting, but for me, that wasn't necessarily my drive. I just saw an opportunity to build a business. What I wanted to do was really learn it from the ground up. And at that time, business schools that I was looking at internationally were not allowing any students into their programs because of the financial crisis that was happening. So we were just like post 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsing, all this sort of chaos going on. And what I saw was a niche opportunity to get into real estate and work foreclosures. And so I had a great opportunity to be mentored by somebody that was doing 200 plus transactions a year. And I basically signed on to be their assistant. And I got paid $500 a week, no matter how many hours I worked. And so if I go back to that time frame, I was getting paid like $4 an hour probably at best. And I was working from the moment I woke up, and I'd leave the office at 9, 10 o'clock at night, just about 7 days a week. And I was inhaling this business. And mainly because I had a passion for it. It was really fascinating. But what I found about myself is that as we would go through these foreclosures and these BPOs, which today, they frown on brokers doing broker price opinions for banks, I was doing probably 10 or 12 of them a day back then. I would see this stray luxury property come across the foreclosure ticker, and it just really piqued my interest. And what that made me do is it made me focus on the high end of the market in a way that my passion sort of gravitated me towards. So I would filter the hot sheet from top to bottom. So the foreclosures we were getting were like 100,000 to 200,000. Well, I was filtering top to bottom so I could see the $2 to $3 million houses that were trading at the time, all the way down to like the bottom end of the market. And I would learn the stories and sort of obsess over this top end demographic. And I'd figure out, okay, who are those agents again? What was that sale again? And I started to accumulate this information that technology could never really tell. So even to this day, I tell our agents, like, technology doesn't tell the whole story. If you're well studied and you understand your farm market, when you get in a position of opportunity with either a prospective seller or prospective buyer, and you can rattle off the who's and the whys of the market, who sold that property, why did it sell, they can go figure out how much they sold for. But when you understand how to articulate value based on the who's and the whys, you can start to create a value in the market that nobody else has, and they can't go get online and get. And so that's what I did at a very early age, and that sort of had a snowball effect for my business.
Love that, man. Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I've been preaching to my group over here is, man, you guys got to find something that they can't find on Realtor.com or Zillow. You got to
Right.
find something unique about that property and share it with them at the open house. Instead of being, here's a 3 bed, 2 bath or whatever, be like, hey, this property is located at one of the highest elevations in our
That's
parish,
right.
or this is some unique feature about the property, especially Florida. There's got to be a ton of unique things about these developments, these buildings, these houses, these foundations. It changes from street to street. So you got to think
Absolutely.
you got to find those unique things. So I
You
love that
better
you
have more
guys are going
value than
back.
a Zillow algorithm.
Yeah,
Zillow
absolutely.
doesn't tell the story.
Absolutely. And with AI, we talked about that a little bit before
Yeah.
the podcast, man. With AI is coming for those realtors who just think that realtor.com and Zillow and saying it's a 3-2 is good enough. They're coming for you. So let's talk a little bit
Yeah.
about AI, man, because that is
Yeah. Let's
changing
talk AI.
quick, man. So
Yes.
talk about AI, how you're using it in your business and how you think it's going to affect realtors in our market right now.
So I think as a real estate agent, the number one thing you want to consider when you think about AI, because the term AI is so scary, artificial intelligence. what I want you to think of is adaptive intelligence. AI allows you to adapt your business to not only serve clients at a higher pace, but to create consistency in that service. And so whether you hop on ChatGPT to try to create a listing description faster or better, or even as simple as prepping an email, right? Maybe you've got a tough email to a seller and you want to deliver it a message in writing, like it allows you to articulate in a whole new way, figuring out how you can adapt your business to allow AI to be more efficient and to spread your service and your productivity out. That's what you want to do as a real estate agent. And I think a lot of us, especially agents in general, we get caught up with being busy over being productive. And I think this idea of busyness makes us feel like we're doing something, but at the end of the day, you want to look at your KPIs, which is your key performance indicators. Essentially, how do you make money? Where does the revenue come from? What activities produce that dollar? And you want to double down on them. And what AI will allow you to do is that there'll be softwares that come out, there'll be certain programs that come out that allow you to do those DPAs, or dollar productive activities, faster and more efficient. And ultimately, the most valuable thing on this planet is organization. It allows you to be a more organized entity to go serve your clients at a high level over and over and over again.
Fired up, dude. I'm loving it. So one thing that I was just at this video conference, Real Estate Video Blueprint, last
Yeah,
week, and Jason Pantana came up and talked about AI, man. I know we're both a huge fan of that guy. But man, one
definitely.
thing that we touched on, which was crazy, was they did a poll of the audience, and it was like 500 or 600 people in the audience, and they
Yeah.
said, "Hey, if you're looking for something, what are you going to? Are you going to ChatGPT, Google, or Yahoo?" And you would be surprised. I think ChatGPT was like the majority of the people search with ChatGPT first
I
and
love it.
not Google. So that was a big change. And I thought in real estate was, man, we really have to get in ChatGPT and search and see what pops up and then adjust just like we do with our Google searches for ourselves. I was shocked to see that was the number one search tool for these top realtors. So, I mean, it's changing quick. So if you're not
It's changing
adapting,
quick, yeah. And there's really, the demographics are so wide. You know, a lot of folks used to say AI is for the young people. Well, it's fun when I go home for a Thanksgiving dinner and I see my Mimi, which all of you from the South know what a Mimi is. She's sitting there
yeah.
Googling, not Googling, she's sitting there looking up things on ChatGPT instead of on Google, or instead of on Facebook, which is her favorite resource. So it's amazing to watch technology change. It changes the way that all of us think. And I think really being willing to experiment with it is everything. You know, there's a trial and error phase. And right now, I think we're in that phase, figuring out what makes us most productive.
So talk to us a little bit about productivity systems, processes. I know that's something that you
Yeah.
and your team pride yourselves on. Is talk to us a little bit about that, man. Systems, processes, what you're
hmm
using in your business right now, what's working, what's not.
Yeah, I travel a lot and speak at a lot of conferences, and I would say the first thing that makes an agent's eyes glaze over is systems and processes. And so I think the hard part about really articulating value from a systems and processes standpoint is that you don't see the benefit of them until you run through them. And I think a lot of us as agents aren't necessarily willing to adapt and change. So I always think of this pipeline principle. And Robert Kiyosaki did a really fantastic job when he wrote this book called Cash Flow Quadrant. And Cash Flow Quadrant talks about this very simple idea of carrying buckets of water versus building a pipeline of water that continually serves. And so you get this fatigue carrying buckets, and a lot of us as real estate agents, like, we love to just get bigger buckets, you know, like it's like my 4 year old when he wants to show dad his muscles. He's like, "Dad, look at this heavy weight that I can lift." And he's like, "Ugh," and you know, he's all about it, but he's not thinking longevity, right? He's just thinking about right there in that moment. And I love it. And I really just want him to stay forever. But what's fun about building pipelines is that you allow organization to support the load of both leadership and just the load of growing and expanding your business. And a lot of times I'll tell my agents, you can solve your problems a handful of ways, but one of the best ways is to solve your problems through your calendar, because you can build out a system and process for prospecting. You can create an ideal daily schedule that allows you to repeat those dollar productive activities day in, day out. And a lot of people who are very successful want to tell you that it's some special secret. But what I'm here to tell you is that you can create success in any business by having consistency through systems and processes that are centered around your business.
Talk to us specifically a little bit about like what are you having some success with as far as like let's just talk about just client to client, they're in a transaction with you. What are you using to communicate with them throughout that process, and what are you using to communicate with them after their sales process is finished? Just so that people can get some real tangible
Yeah.
feedback on what you guys are using at the team.
Yeah, of course. So, from a system and process standpoint, I've hired a COO who is really our touch point for organization. One thing that I can tell everybody on this call is that we can't be good at everything. And I think the reality is that as a real estate agent, we want to micromanage it all. I want to do, I want to build the systems, and I want to, be the rainmaker, and I want to close all the deals. Well, when you look at scaling a business, you never have a CEO that does everything. They're just chief director. And so they're able to look at the framework of the organization and say, look, we're weak here. We need to create a profit and loss statement. We need to, bring in this talent over here. And so for me and the team that I operate today, we have built that on hiring to our successes. And so for me, I'm not the best organizer, so I hired somebody who's my chief organizer. I've got an executive assistant who helps keep me on track. I've got the framework of buyers agents and listing agents on our team that are able to go in and be mayors of every segment of our market where I can't be everywhere at once. And I think when we talk about like realistic processes that people on this call can take up, the very first step is write down your weaknesses and then figure out the who can help me fill those gaps, not necessarily the how. The how can come once you build that structure in. And that's a great book also to plug is Who Not How, helping entrepreneurs really figure out the who's as a problem solver versus trying to do everything themselves. And I think bringing that organizational structure into view from a real estate standpoint is so important because a lot of us, especially the single agents out there, we go, I want to do it all. I want to stick the sign in the yard. I want to put the lockbox up. I want to handle all the showings. But you can do that just so long enough that the scale never happens. And all of your doing actually holds you back from creating a bigger and better business because you're not willing to adopt processes that you can teach other people to do when you're out doing the things that you're really good at.
Man, I love that. That is so awesome. I'm so glad you said that because, yeah, you're right. Realtors just think I need to do everything. And it killed me in
Mm-hmm.
watching some of these realtors saying, like, oh, I'm going to save $40 and go nail my sign in the yard. I'm like, man,
Right.
like, that's the simplest thing that you can outsource and you can take off of your plate. Or even these agents that are saying, like, hey, I need to have my hand in every single bit of the transaction and through the process. But if you're doing that, then what else are you not doing in your business?
Right.
So I love that you've used this leverage to be able to grow an amazing team because absolutely, man, you cannot do this by yourself. And I bet if you look back at your journey and your success in this business, you can thank a certain number of people for helping you along the way. It's not just Jonathan did everything. It's the team, the growth, the people you put in the right seats on the bus helped you get to where you're getting, man. So I love that, dude. So,
That's right. Yeah, and just to kind of end cap that, the one commodity that we all have is time. What's the difference between an entry level real estate agent and the CEO of a major Fortune 500 company? They have the same amount of hours in the day. One of them has an organizational process that they wake up and follow, and the other one is just starting. And so a lot of times we never lay the groundwork and foundation for organization. And without that organization, we can't scale a business effectively. We can't get
yeah.
our time back.
So talk to us a little bit about schedule, man. What's important to you
Yeah.
with your schedule? I know schedule is something that's super important to a lot of realtors, and a lot of realtors are on a journey right now as far as like what does a good schedule look like. So I know
Yeah.
that's a topic that we talk about all the time on our end of things, but tell us, if you had to speak to a realtor, what would be a good success schedule that a realtor could implement, and what would that look like, and what are some things that you're putting in that schedule?
Yeah. Many of you may have heard me talk about this before, but every agent on my team, which we've got 22 agents at this point, we dive into their ideal daily schedule. And so we're all not meant to march to the same rhythm day in, day out, but we all have very similar KPIs we want to hit. So those key performance indicators. And so I always tell our team is like, build your goals into your routine. It's the only way you're going to achieve them. For me, especially, like, mornings are very important. Family time is very important. Making sure that I get home by a certain time is very important. Putting my kids to bed is very important. And then all of the stuff in between, it's really like I build my goals into my schedule. If my goal at the time frame is like, look, we need to produce 30 million this month, it's like I may be cranking up more of my prospecting. If my goal is I've got, $100 million in active listings, I may be cranking up my agent prospecting and making sure that the agent community knows what's going on. I typically recommend for an agent that's starting out like a 30-30-30 rule, where you spend 30% of your time prospecting cold business in your farm market. You spend 30% of your time dealing with current clients, and then you spend 30% of your time re-engaging past clients. Sort of this idea of follow up, follow through, follow back. And that's a great way to plan out a day. Whether you decide that your day starts at 5 a.m. like my COO, or it starts at 6:30 a.m. like myself, whatever that time frame is, you want to budget accordingly, and you want to make sure that you're building those goals into that daily schedule and routine. And that's ultimately how you reach the level of success that you plan for yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of these realtors think that they're going to go on Instagram and make this amazing video that's going to change their world. And they just want to forget that the base of every successful real estate business is prospecting, and it's work, and it's having a plan and all of those things.
Yeah.
So I love that you basically said your schedule and you changed it in the framework of where you are right now and what your goals are, because that was huge, and I caught that. So definitely realtors should be prospecting and using the phones to generate their business, man, because I think you and I share that a little bit in common,
Yeah.
that we're phone guys. We're not afraid to pick up the phone and call somebody to have the opportunity. And I heard a little bit about your backstory, and maybe you can kind of share a little bit about your backstory and how you actually got that huge ball and momentum rolling early on in your career. So
Yeah.
take us there and talk to us a little bit about phones, because I want people to get the max amount of value.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that beginning stages of how you got the
Yeah.
ball
Yeah.
rolling.
I will. Let me end cap on social media for a second, because the number one mistake that agents make on social media is that they focus on vanity over adding value. And I think in that equation, authenticity gets lost. And so if you're an agent and you're focused on how many views am I getting and who's liking my photo and, did Sally Sue see that? Like, those are not added values of your business. Can you put out content that's engaging to other real estate agents? Can you put out content that engages a buyer community and educates them on what's happening in the market? That's what needs to happen more of in our industry. And I think that that's something that gets lost very quickly. So always remember that vanity versus value piece. And it's a really good way to hold yourself accountable anytime you post content on social media.
And in that conference as well, Neil Dingra had said that we don't want to be well known. We want to be known well, which I was like, game changer, baby. That was such a cool quote. And it was so simple, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of these realtors, they want to be influencers, and really
Yeah. Do
want
you
to
want to
be
be an
well,
agent or an influencer?
right. They want to be, well known instead of being like known well. So anyway, like I
That's
thought that
right.
was kind of a
That's
neat little
right.
insert point right there. But yeah, so
Yeah.
take us to the Jonathan
Yeah.
is 18 years old. You're trying to build a real estate business. Take us there. And then I want to take that journey from I'm doing foreclosure properties, I'm doing BPOs for
Yeah.
banks, and I want to take that to now I'm selling luxury properties. So talk to us a little bit about that, but share some of that nitty gritty that I don't want agents to miss that, because I don't want
Yeah.
them to look at your chapter 10 of your story and say, man, how do I get to where Jonathan is? I want to go to, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4 to where they can get some value from your early journey.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, success is always the iceberg effect, and most of us only see what's on top. If you go back and meet 18-year-old Jonathan, you would meet an extraordinarily obsessive person. I think that the only word to define my personality is obsessed. And when I'm obsessed with something, achievement is just simply a matter of time. How quickly will I get there? So 18-year-old Jonathan was surveying, the real estate landscape and just figuring out how I could absorb it all. Selling foreclosures is actually much more difficult than selling luxury properties because you're dealing with a buyer profile that's either an investor that's extremely unemotional, or you're dealing with somebody that this is the most money that they've ever made or ever spent. Really, the gravity of that becomes very obvious. So for me, like, I loved just the ability to kind of put myself in the position to serve and help expand somebody's portfolio. And what I was looking for at an early age, and what I still look for today, and this is something that I think everybody on this call could apply, is I was looking for what I call frequent flyers in the market. So I would hone in on a very specific farm market. Let's call it a geography of maybe 200 addresses. And I would examine like the sales over the last year or 2 years or 5 years and figure out, is there a certain entity or is there a certain developer? Is there a specific mom and pop outfit that's buying multiple properties or selling multiple properties? And if so, how do I get in front of them and add value? And that became a really key component of building my business at an early age. Is I would help identify investors, create value in their portfolio by putting them on properties that, they may not have known about, or helping them achieve something, or getting a contractor that maybe was giving them a better bid. Like, any way I could identify value, I was doing that, and I was trying to create a reputation for that in my farm market. And when it comes to like transitioning from like selling foreclosures to luxury properties, I always tell my team, it's where you gravitate is what you'll cultivate. So I've got team members that they love helping the military. Like, that is what they're obsessed with. And like, when you've got a specific target audience in mind, you better obsess over them and figure out how you can help them. If it's helping military home buyers, or it's selling luxury homes, or, maybe you've got a favorite neighborhood in mind, you've got to put yourself physically in that market and understand, like, what can I do to be different? What can I do to stand out? And a lot of times your knowledge base and just simply being there allows you to make the difference. So I started to gravitate into other segments of the market, and I would examine like my average sales price, and I go, you know what? I'm selling on average 40 homes for $500,000. I want to start doing 50 homes at $1 million. And what is that going to take? And it was really gravitating to other parts of the market and taking the same strategy that I had for high transaction volume and foreclosures and applying that to the luxury space.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man. I love that. I love that journey. Man, so we are getting a little bit close on time, and I want to be respectful to your time because I know a lot of people want it, man. So the goal of the podcast is to provide massive value to realtors, of course. So I always say this: speak to a realtor who may have had a tough 2024. Maybe they're off to a little bit of a slow start in 2025. What would you tell that agent to spark their business, kickstart their business, and then we'll close it out?
I got three things. Number one, don't stop. Persist without exception. Keep going. I just put a property under contract yesterday that in a normal market would have gone immediately. In this market, I've had it available for a year and a half. My first contact with the buyer was in February, and we finally submitted an offer on the property this past weekend. So, and that was daily, weekly follow up for 4 to 5 months. Don't stop. It's not just you, it's all of us. A lot of people go, Jonathan, I'm working twice as hard. I'm only making half as much money. And I remind them, I say, listen, this is all about your mindset, because that's a blessing. I know a lot of people doing a lot different things, different jobs, different positions in life, different geographies. Your ability to mind your vibe, which would be my second advice, is everything. When you walk into a room, are you lighting it up or are you shutting it down? We all have that ability, and we really want to lean into that. And then the third is really an emphasis on being willing to adapt. A lot of people will say, I'm so slow, or things aren't going my way. I'm like, examine your schedule. Are you doing the same old things that was working in 2020 and 2021, but you know that nobody today is doing? Are you still sitting around looking at your phone instead of sitting open houses? What is it that you're afraid to do? Go out and do the hard work. If you could look at my story and take one thing away, put aside obsession and everything else, because at the end of the day, hustle doesn't take any skill set. It's all about showing up day in and day out, doing the hardest work. I was putting in the hardest work in my market. And there's nothing remarkable about me other than I was willing to put in that work. And I think right now, for anybody that's listening that goes, I'm slow, I want you to examine your willingness to work. Are you really putting in that effort?
Love that, man. Absolutely. You got me fired up, dude. I got to make some calls now, man. I'm fired
Let's
up, dude.
go.
So we got to make calls, baby. But yeah, no, man, I love it, dude. That's great advice to realtors. And I'm so excited that you were able to kind of share some of your massive value and your story with us on our podcast, man. I'm going to put some of Jonathan's information in the details of the podcast. We'll be sharing some of these clips on our social media. So I hope that you guys go follow him. And I hope that all my people in Louisiana and in the South use him or his team for opportunities in 30A, man, that you need to find somebody trusted who knows the market out there in that location. So Jonathan, thank you again, my brother, for being on the podcast.
Definitely my pleasure. And if anybody wants to connect with me directly, hit me up on Instagram at Jonathan M. Spears. That's going to be the best place. I do respond to my DMs. So look forward to being a resource here on 30A.
Absolutely, man. Well, I really appreciate it. And I hope that you guys give them a follow, give them a like, and share this podcast with a friend, man, somebody that needs a little encouragement right now. So, guys, I hope that you've enjoyed the podcast. Give us a great review. And I hope that you guys have an amazing day.